Hello, listeners. My name is Lowell, and this is a special podcast that is invading all the feeds. We have a forthcoming project from the Gauntlet that's really exciting and interesting. It involves a lot of people, and Jason's here to talk about that. So, Jason, what is it that the Gauntlet has coming up?
So, coming up as in tomorrow, I'm pretty sure it's going to be tomorrow based off when I think this episode's going to land, we are launching a Kickstarter campaign for a beautiful hardcover book of the first volume of Codex. So we're going to take the first 13 issues of Codex, put them in a big, beautiful book, and hopefully kickstart it successfully.
So let's say that somebody doesn't know what Codex is. What is the elevator pitch so that they know what this product is before we talk about the Kickstarter as a whole?
Yeah, I think that's actually a pretty fair question because I suspect there are going to be a fair number of people who just listen to the podcasts who maybe don't know about other things that the Gauntlet does, who might not be as familiar with Codex. But basically, Codex is an independent tabletop role-playing game zine. It's probably more accurate to call it a magazine because of its size and production values. It's not really like this sort of old style zine so much, but it is a zine. We publish it every month on the first of the month, like clockwork, in PDF form. And basically, we publish supplementary material for existing indie RPGs, hacks and reskins of indie RPGs, as well as entirely original games. We source from a bunch of different people. We have features that are crowdsourced. We have features that we pay folks freelance to write, and we get art from a bunch of different sources. It's just cram full of art. Every month is a little different. They're organized around a theme. So, for example, the one that's out right now as of the moment of this recording, it's called Codex Asphalt, and it has a sort of like road theme. And so it has several features related to like being on the road.
And a couple of games in there, which has been a new development. A lot of those developed through the Gauntlet community. So how do people get the Codex?
Okay, so generally speaking, the month-to-month PDF of Codex is available in our Patreon feed. You pledge $4 or higher, and you get access to that PDF, whatever is available that month. That's what you get. We also make back issues available on drive-thru, but the back issues don't come out for several months after the original release. So basically, drive-thru is like about 3 or 4 months behind a Patreon feed. So to get the newest issues, you go to the Patreon, and that's the $4 feed on Patreon.
So this is a question I've wanted to ask you for a long time. This is a hugely ambitious thing. Codex is super nice, full color, great artwork, layout, interesting design, pieces taken from lots of different people. What made you decide to even do that?
Yeah, I get this question a lot, actually. And I don't know, madness, craziness. I don't know. You know, here's the thing. The actual story of it is, a couple of years ago, before we launched the Gauntlet Patreon, the Gauntlet was in bad shape. It was pretty much on the verge of being done. It was starting to cost me a huge amount of money every month. And it was just getting more and more complicated to run because we had no revenue. And so I made the decision, we've got to launch a Patreon to start paying for some of this stuff. And that Patreon needs to be successful because at the scale we're doing things, I can't keep it up, basically. I can't keep it up unless we have some money coming in. And so I was not confident that we could raise enough money just off the strength of the podcasts. I love the podcasts. The podcasts are awesome. But I looked at other podcasters kind of in our lane and how their Patreons were doing. And my estimation was it wasn't going to be enough. And so based off like how other folks in our lane were doing with their Patreons, we do a little bit more in the Gauntlet, right? Like those folks just produce podcasts, but we have our gaming calendar. We have like face-to-face group. At that time, we were paying for the face-to-face group fees. We had so many like little things here and there that were just kind of adding up, you know? And so I made the decision pretty early on that before we launched the Patreon, we're not going to do it unless we have something to sort of give the patrons, right? I wanted there to be some kind of like backer reward apart from just the podcast, which they get for free. And so I made the decision to do Codex, and I have no experience doing layout. I have no experience doing developmental editing of games or role-playing game material. I have never done any kind of like art sourcing or anything like that, art direction. I've done a little bit of like design work like in my professional career years ago, but it's been a long time since I kind of touched a lot of that stuff, you know? And so it was a big, tall order, actually. It was something that I wanted to get done, and I felt like we had to do it. We had to have something for the Patreon. You know, I just really felt that very strongly. And so I spent a good number of months practicing, basically. We kind of had this test issue called Codex Blood. That's actually going to be part of the Kickstarter. Codex Blood, we sourced the material really early. We used everything we had to kind of like, I did some like layouts of my own, and they were not so great. And eventually, Ollie Jeffrey got in touch with me and he said, hey, look, I can tell what you're trying to do here. Let me lay out Blood for you. Let me show you what I can do and see what you think. And so he did. And I was blown away. Like, it was beautiful. I was like, wow, like this is exactly what I needed to look like. And basically, once I had Ollie's layout in hand, I was like, okay, now I feel confident that we can do this. And so, yeah, that was the main thing about Codex. It was initially just something to help the Gauntlet stay afloat.
Wow. And it is certainly to our Patreon. I mean, it's a high value product. I've seen people doing Patreons just for something like that.
Yeah. You know, Codex grew and grew, right? Like, I think we kept kind of like growing. Like, as the Patreon started doing better and better, I started like spending a little bit more money on Codex and other things in the Gauntlet. And what I really loved about the project, ultimately, I really started to learn about myself and about like us as a team, is that we could do it, right? Like we could do it. We could produce this beautiful thing every month. And I was learning new skills in terms of like being the editor of the zine. And so that was really nice. And yeah, so it just kept kind of going and going. And now it's kind of like a big, important part of the Patreon, right? Mm-hmm. Probably after Gauntlet Hangouts is probably the most important thing.
And you've put together a pretty substantial team of people who work or come in and help out with bits of it. So who has worked on it so far?
Yeah. So the original team was myself and Ollie, of course. And David Lafreniere, my co-host on Discern Realities. David kind of helped me with just like sort of playtesting games and kind of editing the material and things like that. We were the Codex masthead for a long time. Later on, we added Lauren McManaman to be a line editor, and she's fabulous. And then we added Ryan McNeil to handle the miscellany portion of the Codex. For listeners who don't know, the miscellany is like this totally fully crowdsourced from the community. And every month it's 3 dozen of this or 3 dozen of that, like little cool, fun, descriptive, evocative things that you can use in your games. And so Ryan took over that and is doing a terrific job.
Awesome. That's really very, very cool. So let's swing back to the Kickstarter. You say this is a hardcover volume. Tell us what it's going to look like. What's in it? What's being added that people wouldn't have normally gotten?
Well, so here's what it is.
Okay.
We are going to produce a hardcover book, full size, like roughly 8.5 by 11, that kind of size, that has the first 13 issues of the zine in it. That goes from that test issue Blood all the way to the last issue of Volume 1, which was Codex Joy. And so those are all going to be in Volume 1. It's roughly 270 pages, 270 full color pages. And I think we're going to try to get some really nice like foil art for the cover. And otherwise, it's just the first 13 issues made physical, right? And beautiful in this book. You know, Codex has always been like so beautiful on screen, right? Like it's a very, very beautiful product. And more than that, it's a reflection of our community, right? Like so many people have participated in Codex over the years. So many people have contributed stuff to it. So many people have written and done art for it. And it's gorgeous. And also it's been a platform for people, right? Like Lauren McManaman, our editor, before she was our editor, we published her first tabletop role-playing game in its pages, right? And now she's working on several like much bigger, more significant role-playing game products, right? That's true of a number of the artists and other authors as well. Like they've kind of used Codex as a platform to like go work on bigger things. And so Codex is, you know, it's special, right? And we want there to be a big, beautiful book that reflects and adequately honors like how special the zine is.
And certainly I know if in a community I have seen you field the question of, can we get printed copies of the Codex repeatedly.
Right, yeah, lots of people ask for it, yeah.
So 13 issues. You've mentioned blood. You've mentioned joy. What are some of the other theme issues we'll see in this one?
Okay, so the 13 issues of Volume 1 of Codex are Codex Blood. I should mention that Codex Blood is not technically part of Volume 1.
Okay.
Officially, it's like a test issue, but we're throwing it in there anyway. So Codex Blood. And then Volume 1 proper starts with Codex Chrome, and then Codex Ectoplasm, Codex Starlight, Dark, Love, Yellow, Iron, Madness, Time, Neon, Crystal, and Joy. So truly, I suppose it's like 12 issues of Volume 1 plus Codex Blood. So 13 issues.
So I know they're all like your children, and we've got all kinds of exciting pieces throughout there, but can you point to a few articles or things that have appeared in that codex that you're like, this is dynamite, people, this is what you need to look at?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, so let me give you some numbers first.
Okay.
I think it might be helpful to give listeners the full scope of what's going on in this book. Okay. I went through earlier today and I made a list of like all the different pieces that there were and original games and supplements for games. And I have some numbers to share. So there is supplementary material for the following games. Urban Shadows has a piece in there. We have 2 pieces for the Sprawl, a Monster of the Week mystery, a Melandros scenario, 2 Lovecraft-esque scenarios, a setup for the Final Girl, a 66 scenario, a Lady Blackbird supplement, which is awesome, by the way. Rich Rogers wrote that one. 2 Cheat Your Own Adventure scenarios, 2 original OSR adventures, a collection of miscellaneous Powered by the Apocalypse things, something for the Veil and Apocalypse World. We have a brand new playbook for Apocalypse World in there. The real centerpiece, the real anchor of the first volume of Codex is Dungeon World. Because at that time we were doing tons of Dungeon World in the community. So Dungeon World features heavily. Taken in total of Dungeon World monsters, magic items, and moves, there are 116. So tons of original Dungeon World stuff. There is a Dungeon World Compendium class as well as 6 Dungeon World starter scenarios. So that's just the supplemental material in Volume 1. And then there are a bunch of original games as well. These original games are within the pages. Called, The Society for Vegan Sorcerers, Wind on the Path, Rituals, The Madness of Cuchulainn, Time-gasm, Reset, Turning, Overlooked, Tonight Only Soundcheck Presents, Mechanical Oryx, Root Clearance, Memories, Heroes in Crystal Kingdoms, Keepers of Antara, Bunk Beds, and So You're Becoming a Dragon. And then, of course, we have the 13 miscellanies. So it's a huge amount and a huge variety of stuff. And so picking the favorites is going to be tough. I think that when I looked at all this stuff today and I was really thinking about like where the zine has been and what's been going on with it, I think the things that most excite me in Volume 1 are probably the things that kind of showed me the way and hinted at what Volume 2 was going to be like. Right? And so we started to have original games right around issue 5 or 6, somewhere around there. And one of those original games, one of the early ones, was called The Society for Vegan Sorcerers. And that is a LARP by Wendy Gorman. And what I love about this LARP is it was funny. It's very playable. We had beautiful art for it by Sean Poppy. And it was just, it felt really special. It was like, this is something that we're only going to be able to find in Codex. There's not going to be, it kind of felt like this game could only exist in Codex's pages. There was no other way of getting something like this published, right? Like LARPs don't get published very often anyway. And this had like this nice quality of like magazine style readability, like pleasurable read quality combined with the fact that it was a game, right?
Right.
And so the Society for Vegan Sorcerers was like, to me, a big hint of like, I kind of see a different path for Codex. This would have been around issue 7. And I was like, okay, this is cool. And then we started to get a few more original games. And I think the highlight of all the original games for me has got to be Wind on the Path by Jonathan Lavallee. That is a 2-player with a caveat, a 2-player wandering samurai game, except it's not really 2 players. It's actually like designed to be played at a convention. And so you kind of like, everybody kind of has their samurai, and you meet at the convention and you quickly like do your samurai duel. But it's not just a samurai duel. It also like tells this ongoing story about the samurais and their history and all this kind of stuff. And it's super clever the way it like hides information from players based off like how successful your samurai has been, like, how notorious they are and that kind of thing. It's really, really clever, really sharply put together by the Codex team. And that, like, to me is like, wow, this is super freaking cool. That continues to be the most popular issue on drive-thru, by the way. Like, people go to drive-thru to pick that up. Yeah. And so I think it's going to be great to have that in a big, beautiful book, right? But honestly, there's just so much cool stuff. Some other things that I think are really special. I think that definitely Rich's Lady Blackbird piece, because Lady Blackbird is a really like storied, famous game in story games, right? And yet, nevertheless, it's still like, it's been out for a while, right? And there are certain aspects of it that, if you play it enough, like Rich has, you start to realize that it could kind of use a little bit of like nip and tuck here and there, right? And so Rich got John's permission to write this really nice supplement for Lady Blackbird that I think like dramatically improves like Lady Blackbird play, right? And that's another thing. Like, so that article also, I think, like kind of really signaled like what Codex can be. It shows our community's like passion and dedication for these games and kind of how we put our spin on them and give our like particular insights on them.
The focus on play that has been really important to the Gauntlet throughout.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think Codex is a perfect reflection of that.
Now, in that discussion, you mentioned Volume 2. So that's going to be a Kickstarter in the future, you hoping?
I think so. Yeah, probably not till sometime next year, but provided this one goes okay.
Right.
If this one's a total disaster, then the answer is no. But provided this one goes okay, yeah, I anticipate we'll do Volume 2 as well. Volume 2, the PDF versions are already done, right? We're finished with Volume 2. We're actually moving into Volume 3 next month. So yeah, Volume 2 is going to be a thing.
So is there anything that you see as a major difference between Volume 1 and Volume 2?
Yes, absolutely. So several things. First of all, Volume 1, as much as I love it, in Volume 1, we were kind of untested. No one knew what Codex was for most of Volume 1, and our community was much smaller, and we didn't have as much money. and so while Volume 1 is excellent, don't get me wrong, we made it work, right? Like we really, really like put in the hours and stretched every penny to make Volume 1 awesome. But the one thing about Volume 1 that I've never been happy about is the fact that it does not have a hugely diverse set of creators and contributors. The zine is diverse at the top, me, right? and we did do a good job of, we've always hired like trans artists. That's something that's been really important to me. There are a lot of like really fabulous like trans women artists in role-playing games, and I try to hire them whenever I can. And we were doing that in Volume 1. But most of the articles and submissions were being written by straight white dudes, which, love all the straight white dudes who contributed to Codex, right? Not knocking it. But nevertheless, as the Gauntlet has grown, we have made diversity a priority in our community, right? And so Codex Volume 2 very much reflects that. We had a little bit more money. Once we hit Volume 2, we were better at it. Like, I wasn't so focused on just trying to learn the ropes. And so I could spend more of my energy and indeed resources on trying to get a more diverse pool of talent. And I didn't end up doing the numbers entirely, but I know in Volume 2 where it's something like basically every dollar that got paid out to someone in Volume 2, of all those dollars, 48% of them went to women. And nice. So that makes me really, really happy. And so, so Volume 2 is considerably more diverse. And I think because of that, I also think that the actual content is more diverse too. There's just a wider variety of content. There's not as much Dungeon World. Volume 1 was very Dungeon World heavy. And if you're listening to this in the Discern Realities feed, you're going to love Volume 1 because Volume 1 has tons of Dungeon World stuff. And that's important because we love Dungeon World. It's a big part of our community. But Volume 2 definitely has a lot more original games. It definitely has supplements for more niche, smaller games. There are just a few more like interesting spins on like the idea of an indie RPG, right? Like it just very much feels much more cohesive. All of the cover art is extremely cohesive. Like Claudia Cangini did all the artwork in Volume 2. And so it creates this really cohesive look. And I think the content just fits each theme a little bit better too. So we also began to like really, really sharpen up the overall visual design language of Volume 2. So it's very, very strong in Volume 2. Volume 1 is still lovely and great and amazing, but Volume 2 definitely seems like an evolution, as it should be.
So the Kickstarter campaign is really just for the hardcover full color of Volume 1, and you've made adjustments to the layout to fit that.
Yes, we are in the middle of doing that indeed.
Are there stretch goals? How are you going to handle that?
So the stretch goal I really want to hit, and I'll just tell you about it now, listeners, because I think a lot of people are going to be upset if we don't hit this, is including the Discern Realities Annual. So the Discern Realities Annual, if you go on drive-thru and you buy the Volume 1 bundle on drive-thru, for example, you get the Discern Realities Annual with it, right? But it's kind of a bonus there. It's not technically a part of any of the volumes. The thing about adding the Discern Realities Annual, it's 40 pages. And so it increases the price of the project significantly. And so we can only do it if we hit the stretch goal. Like the difference between like with DR Annual and without DR Annual is significant in terms of the cost.
Oh, yeah. I was in publishing. I know how much just a folio can change things, especially with color printing.
Yeah. So these 40 full color pages add significantly to the cost of the project. And so, that's the first stretch goal we're aiming for. Like, I definitely want to get the first 13 done in the, that's like at a minimum, we got to do that. But if we can do the DR Annual, that'd be awesome. And if we do hit the DR Annual, it adds a lot. So if I'm looking at my notes again, suddenly with the DR Annual, all those Dungeon World magic items and monsters and things, we move from 116 to 173. We move up to 8 compendium classes instead of just 1, and 7 starter adventures. And that also has a ton of like original advice and custom procedures and things that David and I did as part of the Discern Realities podcast. So that Discern Realities special, which was originally produced in conjunction with the Discern Realities podcast, we would love to include that. That's the first stretch goal. I also would love, we may not hit this. I mean, I'd love it if we could get close to this, but I would really, 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 really love to include an original full color piece of artwork for each issue in the actual hardcover book. So like a new piece of art for Blood, a new piece of art for Chrome, and so forth. Just something to kind of like make the book extra special. I would definitely do my best to make sure that like the artists on that, I'd be aiming to get artists from marginalized communities. I think that's pretty important to me. So I don't know. That's kind of pie in the sky. We'll see.
Right.
We'll see how we do.
So you've alluded to some of the vision that Gauntlet has and some of the things you've really aimed at for Codex in bringing in a greater, more diverse crew of developers and writers and so on. Is this the first step in something new? How does this fit into your vision for where the Gauntlet is going?
I think it's our vision, right? I mean, this is definitely the vision of several people in the community who, several of the principals who take a lot of day-to-day responsibility with the community. And it's something I talk to with our community members a lot too. But I think that, when I look at Codex, I see a nascent, small publishing platform for new writers, right? We very purposely focused on new and unpublished writers for Codex because it was kind of important for me to, I was really just determined to like give new voices a platform, right? And that, we have a few like more established writers in there as well, but for the most part, we try to keep it to newer folks. And when I look at that, I think that's great. It's small in scale, but it's good. Even at our size, though, we've always paid a competitive rate. We let the authors keep all their work, right? And so I think Codex has always been like very fair and generous with authors. And when I look at Codex and I look at the Gauntlet more widely, I start to think about stuff like that, right? I happen to think that there are a lot of barriers and difficulties to breaking into tabletop role-playing game publishing, right? I think if you have not put in the thankless years to establish yourself, kickstarting a game or trying to bring a game to market is super risky, right? And I look at the Gauntlet and I think, okay, I know what our strengths are. Given all of our strengths, can we be a platform to make it easier for folks to get their stuff published, to bring it to market, right? And so, when I look at some of the difficulties of tabletop role-playing game publishing, one of the things that comes to mind is simply getting the game play tested, right? I think that is something that's hard for a lot of people, right? To the point where they go to this, this convention every year just to run a couple of play tests, right? And yet at the Gauntlet, we have a huge platform for playtesting, right? We have people playtesting stuff all the time. And so that's one aspect of it. Having enough capital to invest in nice artwork, like in the beginning, and to do nice layout for beta materials, that's something we can do, right? We're very lucky. Our patrons have been, very generous and helpful in that way. So we have a little bit of money set aside for stuff like that. And hopefully if the Codex Kickstarter does well, we'll have even more. So that's one thing. Just support a team of people who have experience with layout and all the other editorial concerns that you have when launching a product. And so I look at all that stuff and I say to myself, well, can we do this? Like, can we become a publishing entity? Can we become a publishing platform? And I think the way I want it to look, if this works out, is the best thing I can compare it to is like a co-op, I suppose. Like something where basically authors and creators get to keep more of what they do, right? No matter what else you think of Lamentations of the Flame Princess, I happen to think that Lamentations of the Flame Princess has a really, really generous publishing deal with its authors, right? They don't pay anything up front, but they split the profits 50-50. And that's pretty generous, like for the author to take 50% and Lamentations take the other 50%, because Lamentations does all the risk, right? And so I'm envisioning something like that, where the Gauntlet takes all the risk and provides a lot of the infrastructure and marketing as well, right? We have we have ways of marketing too. Like, as you can hear, right? If you're listening to this podcast, it worked. So we provide all of that, and we get to keep, a certain percentage to help with our operating costs and our operating expenses. And then the author keeps the rest, right? I want something like that. I want a more generous, a more personal, more support type publishing situation. I don't know if we can do it. I believe we can do it. I think if we do well with this Kickstarter and we can have a nice little bit of operating budget afterwards, I then know we can do it. And I hope we pull it off, because I think that there is a desire out there for people to have something like this, right? I just think that the tabletop role-playing game publishing model is so brutal. It's really brutal. I'm not going to put any companies on blast, but like, it's basically just like freelance work for nothing, right? I mean, it's essentially what it is. I mean, there are a few companies that are doing better than that, but for the most part, it's just like really, really brutal, tough stuff. And so that's my goal for this. My big term goal is, can we figure something else out? Can we be something better? So that's kind of my thinking there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So now it's a self-serving question for me to ask this, Jason, but I know that you do have a few other things in the pipeline for projects for Gauntlet, publishing other things. And what would those include? Well,
we do have a few things. And I think these are things that as long as we do reasonably well on the Codex Kickstarter, we will be able to press forward with these things for sure. So we have a couple smaller projects. We have the Cheat Your Own Adventure Story Starter project, and then this Monster of the Week mystery project, which we haven't talked about those a lot publicly, but those are two significantly smaller projects, but they're little things I think we can get done next year. But the bigger thing, and what you're alluding to in your lead up there, Lowell, is Hearts of Wulin. We're going to do Hearts of Wulin. So you and I have talked about this a lot, and I happen to think Hearts of Wulin is a really great game. People in the community seem to love it. And I imagine it's something that we can do really beautifully and well. We have a lot of experience with Powered by the Apocalypse games. And so it just seems like a project that is, because it's yours, and also because of our sort of community like experience with PBTA, it just feels like something we can do really successfully. So yeah, I'm really excited about Hearts of Wulin.
Yeah, the community has been super supportive, and I don't think I would have moved forward on it if it hadn't been for people helping me out there.
Yeah. And that kind of gets to what I was saying earlier, right? Like, listeners won't know this, because this is the kind of thing that if you're not in our Slack, at least you don't have any sense of it, but there are a number of projects bubbling up within the Gauntlet, right? We are kind of we're right on the knife's edge of a number of things getting ready to come out that originated here. We're not going to be publishing all those things, but we definitely are going to have our name on it somewhere, either in the thanks or me as a developmental editor. I'm dev editor on many of these projects, or something like that, right? There are a lot of things coming that the Gauntlet's had its hands on, or the hand on, as it were.
You haven't mentioned the fact that one of the highest levels of the Patreon is you working with designers.
Yeah. We have this game designer Patreon thing, which is, it's been sold out forever and there won't be new ones just because I don't have the bandwidth to do anymore. But basically I have 5 folks whose projects I do dev editing on. We have a meeting every month and we talk about it and we refine the work and we do that. Fraser Simons is one of those people. And there are several projects, like those are coming, right? Those aren't even the ones I was referring to earlier. I mean, there are some that are like that have just been developed almost wholly within our spaces, right? And they're looking good. They're getting play tested and they're going to come out eventually in some way, shape or form. I would love for the Gauntlet to be in a position soon to where we can help those people even more, right? That's really my aim. We provide this great space. We provide a lot of this infrastructure for playtesting and discussion and feedback and all that stuff. But I would also like to provide the ability to help these folks like really make their projects sharp and look great and marketable.
And you haven't mentioned it, so I have to pull this out of you. You've also been working very hard on your own game, The Between.
Oh, right.
On
Yeah.
long-term projects and playtesting that people have absolutely loved. So can you say something about that?
I mean, there's 2 paths for The Between. One path is the path where by 2020, we are full into the publishing swing of things, and The Between is just the next project on the plate, right? I think I'll have it ready to go probably by early 2020. That's what I'm thinking. The other path is where that didn't happen and for whatever reason, and I just kickstarted it myself. So either way, I think early 2020 is when The Between is happening. Obviously, I would love for it to be a Gauntlet project, and I hope that, these smaller projects we have planned, Hearts of Wulin and Codex Volume 2, I suspect those will take up most of next year. I would love for those to be a lead up to The Between. I think that would be terrific, Fingers crossed. We'll see. I mean, it's a really exciting time. It's a really scary time. It's really scary.
It's a jump into the void doing a Kickstarter.
It really is. Yeah. I don't know if listeners know this, but I do everything in the Gauntlet on a volunteer basis, right? The Gauntlet pays my phone bill. That's basically it, right? And I paid myself back for a lot of the expenses that I incurred before we had a Patreon. But other than that, I don't really get anything from the Gauntlet, monetarily. And so the Kickstarter hopefully will be a way where I can finally give myself a little bonus, actually, get to keep a little bit of money. That would be lovely as a thank you for your work. Right.
Mm-hmm.
But it's scary because I know that, the Kickstarter goes one of 2 ways, right? It's either successful and it funds, and then we're all in, right? And then we're all in. And then I have to really figure out a way of organizing my time and managing these projects so that it's worth us doing, right? And that's going to be a whole thing. Or it's a failure, in which case I'm off the hook for a lot of extra work, but I am crushed emotionally because we did not come through on the Kickstarter. I feel like it's scary no matter what, right? I prefer the first one. So I would love for it to fund listeners. Truly, we're doing it because Codex deserves it. All the people who've contributed to Codex deserve it. It deserves to be out there. It deserves to be in this form, right? I really want to do that. And my hope is that it leads to bigger things, because all I've ever wanted to do in the hobby is to change things, to shift paradigms, to create new ways of doing things, right? And we do that constantly in the Gauntlet. And I hope this is the next step. I really, really do. So listeners, please consider supporting the Kickstarter. Oh, we should say something about the Kickstarter before we go. Well, the way we're setting up the pledge tiers is, if you've been a Patreon supporter for a while and you already have all of Volume 1 on PDF, there's going to be a pretty substantially discounted tier for you. Okay. That tier will be significantly cheaper than the full tier. It won't come with PDFs. So that's how we know. That's how we'll kind of try to control who gets it, right? So if you already have the PDFs because you're a patron, then you can go get this PDF free tier, which is significantly cheaper. We can only afford to do a certain number of those. I think there's going to be about 400 of those spots. And so we did the math and we think that's about how many of those we can offer to make it still profitable. So if you've been a patron, you have all the PDFs, keep an eye open for that limited discounted tier, because that's for you.
So I do want to say this. If you haven't read the Codex, if you haven't read any of these issues, you should go read them. I had kind of, we've got a zine thing for the first couple months, and Jason's done this thing. This is how it always happens with Gauntlet things. I'm like, oh, it'll be fine. And then I go and look at it, and it blew my mind. I'm going to be absolutely honest about that. I went, holy cow, I can't believe the level of professionalism and quality of stuff here. If you're a gamer that likes just stuff, Geez, there's so much stuff there. You really should go and check it out.
Awesome. Thank you for saying that. I like to think that we always surprise people with Codex.
Surprised me, and I thought I knew better, honestly. So this is going to run through October?
Yes, it launches October 2nd and probably be a 30-day campaign.
Okay. And if people want to check out the Codex, they can go drive through RPG right now, and you can hunt for them there. Under the Gauntlet is the publishing arm for that?
Yeah, on DriveThru you have to search Gauntlet Codex. That's the best way to find them there. There's also on DriveThru and also on our website too, there are free issues of Codex. So if you want to just check it out and not pay any money, you can get Codex Chrome, which is in Volume 1. You can go look at that one. And then Codex Hell in Volume 2 is free. Definitely check out those free ones. I strongly encourage you to do that. If you don't know anything about Codex, check those free ones out and see if it's something you might like.
Listeners, thank you for listening to this. And Jason, thank you for taking the time to go over this for everybody and give them the spiel.
Oh, thanks for doing it, Lowell. I appreciate it.